I played Silent Hill 2 for the first time last week, and I think it is a bad video game. Would make an interesting novel though. Maybe an excellent short film perhaps? Now before you go down to the comments to say something we both know you'll regret, let me start by saying yes. I know that Silent Hill 2 is a very impactful game for a lot of people. I know for many years it has been seen as the go-to example of psychological horror done right in a video game. I know a ton of people love the carefully constructed story, the uncanny dreamlike nature of the performances, the heavy atmosphere, and the stellar music. Look, my gripes are my gripes, and that's totally fine. My gripes don't have anything to do with any of the stuff I just mentioned. No, my gripes are all related to Silent Hill 2 as a video game. So if you think I'm gonna trash the game's story or themes or atmosphere or anything like that, no worries, I'm not gonna. I am gonna totally trash it as a video game you play with your controller plugged into your game console plugged into your TV. So brace yourself for that, I guess. Growing up as a Resident Evil fan, I know a thing or two about survival horror. That series is credited with pioneering the genre for a reason. Back in the early 2000s, I wasn't playing Silent Hill 2. No, I was playing Resident Evil Remake on my shiny new GameCube, because I was 11 and the ESRB ratings are clearly just a suggestion. Silent Hill 2 was on my radar, it was getting a lot of praise at the time, but to be honest, from the looks of it, it seemed even more scary than the Resident Evil Remake, and I could already only play that during daylight hours. I'd already cut my teeth on the PS1 Resi titles, but that remake is the first one that I actually got to the end of, and all by myself. It was agonizing in all the right ways. Ended up completing everything in that game aside from the invisible enemies mode, because I had enough self-love even at age 11 to never put myself through something like that. Resident Evil and Silent Hill are very similar, and yet very different. I find comparing them side by side really fascinating because Silent Hill took the Resident Evil formula and changed just enough to make it terrible. It's like everything about how its gameplay is designed is a perfect case study on how to ruin a proven success. If Resident Evil is survival horror perfected, Silent Hill 2 is we have survival horror at home. I'm going to break down the elements of survival horror that Resident Evil set the groundwork for, and then point out how Silent Hill 2 shits the bed trying to build on top of it. We're going to start with one of the most important aspects of survival horror, inventory management. Silent Hill 2 doesn't have any inventory management. Alright, that was easy. Next section. I'm kidding, of course, but yeah, Silent Hill 2 decided to let the player carry whatever they wanted at all times. Half of the survival horror genre is just that, survival. It's up to the player to manage their limited resources as they progress through the game. In Resident Evil, you have to weigh the risks of trying to carry more ammo, the key item that you may or may not need, and even health, in case you run into trouble far from your last save. You don't have to consider this at all in Silent Hill 2, and the lack of meaningful moment-to-moment decision making means the game is way less engaging than your typical Resident Evil. This feeds into all the other issues I have with the game. Since my inventory has no limit, what I pick up doesn't matter. Avoiding enemies doesn't matter, I just kill them. I've got the ammo for it, and there's no downside to doing so. Not like, say, the Crimson Heads in Resident Evil Remake. If the enemies do hit me, fine, whatever. I've got the healing items to deal with that. If I stumble upon the main puzzle for the area, might as well just try everything I've got with me. It'll never not be with me. I never have to consider any item more important than any other item. James is just able to stuff it all into his bottomless pocket. Maybe it's another Silent Hill delusion. Oh, spooky. Part of this is also just plain old poor game balance. I played on the normal difficulty for both combat and puzzles, and I never ran into a problem in regards to my resources. Not my health, and not my ammo. In Resident Evil, even after all these years, I still have to consider the little things. What's coming up next? What types of enemies will I run into? What are they weak to? Fire? Maybe the acid rounds? Would the strengths of another weapon be more useful in this moment? Do I leave these herbs here on the ground in case I need a heal when I'm backtracking through? What do I take with me? Even with how much I've played this game, it's never so straightforward. This is fun. Using my brain is fun. Taking away all the nuance and streamlining everything like Silent Hill 2 does really makes me feel like the game is in a totally different genre. Like, sure, it's horror, but there's nothing survival about it. The enemies in Silent Hill 2 are terrible. First, there are only 4 of them that you really engage with in any meaningful way, and of those 4, 3 of them are way too similar to each other. The 4th enemy, the Abstract Daddy, is a boss fight that gets demoted to basic mook in the final area of the hotel, which honestly sucks for story reasons considering that monster isn't connected to James, but also for gameplay reasons because it's literally just a reused boss. There's one more enemy actually that only ever appears under the floor, but it's so lame and ineffective at doing anything, it's not even worth breaking down. Lying figures, mannequins, and nurses are all bipedal feminine monsters who move slowly and try to attack you directly. All 3 of them suffer severe stun lock from anything you do to them, and all 3 of them go down in 3 or 4 bullets. The lying figure probably shakes out to be the best of the 3, because it can at least scurry across the floor, and it has a long-range attack option. The game tries for a light stealth element, where if you turn off your flashlight you can just walk by the enemies most of the time, but there's just no point to engage in that system. I mean, you will have ammo, because you can carry everything, so just kill them and be done with it. If for whatever reason you don't have ammo, your pipe or your plank is more than capable, especially compared to the knife in Resident Evil, because it will keep enemies stun locked until they go down. These guys are a fucking joke. After dealing with just a few of them, their impact was lost on me for the rest of the game. The lack of enemy variety wouldn't even be a problem. It wouldn't be a problem if the few enemies we did get were just better designed. I want to compare these basic ass enemies to Resident Evil's most basic ass enemy, the humble zombie. In Silent Hill 2, none of the enemies have a grab to deter you from trying to run past them. And if they do have a grab, they never decide to use it. This is pretty much the zombies' claim to fame. Zombies in Resident Evil are not stun locked by light weapons like the pistol either. Sure, they'll flinch, but they're going to keep coming for you. This plays really well with the targeting system. The player is asked to make the choice to fight or run, never both at the same time. If you choose to engage a zombie, you are choosing to stay put, and that means that zombie is going to gain ground on you if you don't put it down fast enough. Better make sure that pistol's loaded beforehand. Zombies also take many more bullets than most enemies in Silent Hill 2, so engaging with them as they close in on you is very tense, especially if you've got multiple zombies in an area. The enemies in Silent Hill 2 cannot walk towards you while being shot, and even if they could, James can walk while firing. So they just don't stand a chance the way this is set up. The cards are severely stacked against them. This is all without even mentioning all the other distinct enemies in Resident Evil Remake. To name just a few, the dogs punish a player panic shooting due to their high mobility, and the nimble hunters do the same but are much more deadly. And they have a one-hit KO lunge that punishes a player who dares walk around at low health. None of the bosses are reused as regular enemies either, so every boss gets to stay distinct, and I feel they're all way better designed. The bosses in Silent Hill 2 all take place in rooms that are way too small given the size of the enemy, and don't provide adequate feedback on whether what you're doing is even working. The first boss fight against Pyramid Head is a great example. When I first got to this fight, I unloaded bullets on him as fast as I could, but it just didn't seem effective. I thought maybe I could only really do damage from the back because they have this clangy metal sound effect for when he was being shot. It made me think that I was just hitting his helmet, which is huge to be fair, and there's not really any solid visual indicator that what I'm doing here is working. Compare that to even the first battle against Yawn, the giant snake in Resident Evil. Every time I shoot this thing, it very visibly takes damage, and my gamer brain likes that. You know what I mean? The boss fight against Eddie is one of the worst boss fights I've ever fucking seen. Sure, it's not hard, it's not like I died here or anything, but this first phase is nothing but you and him exchanging shots very stupidly in a small room with you going into the menu every few shots to heal, and the second phase is just that again in a bigger room with him running up every once in a while to try to punch you during your gunfight. This looks terrible, it feels terrible, and I'm honestly amazed it made it into the game. Even Silent Hill 2 fans don't defend this fight. Like, it's terrible. It's just fucking trash. Now, the closest comparison to a fight like this in Resident Evil is probably something like Nemesis in Resident Evil 3, but in that game, to deal with close-range threats, you at least have a dodge. And that does a lot to make things less awkward. And when Nemi is shooting you, it's with a big, visible projectile. So it's really easy to dodge it or just move out of the way. You can't really do much to dodge Eddie's bullets, so this whole fight is just a really shit war of attrition. You know it's bad, I know it's bad, but it's fine, right? Because James killed his wife. He put her body in the back seat and then convinced himself that he didn't. Guys, I understand. That story really hits hard. I'm not even being sarcastic. It does. It's a great story. Hell, it hits so hard, it makes you forget how terrible Eddie's boss fight is. It's no secret that the enemies in combat in this game are ass, and most won't sweat it because the story is just that good. I wish I could be one of those people, but that's just not my wave. I'm just way more interested in how a game plays, and whatever the hell the story is doing is just a nice bonus when it's great, and doesn't bother me at all when it's awful. I mean, sure, I will make fun of it, but if that gameplay is singing, then I mean, that's all I really need.
This town, there's something wrong with it. It's kind of hard to explain, but...
Is it dangerous?
Maybe. And it's not just the fog, either.
Okay, I got it. I'll be careful.
Alright, I'd say the other really big pillar of survival horror has got to be the level design. These games usually take place in some type of escape room, or maybe a puzzle box is a better word. For example, Resident Evil takes place inside the Spencer Mansion, and many routes are blocked at the start of the game until the player finds the first few keys that open up more of the area and grant access to various key items that lead to other key items. You start in the mansion, then the guest residents surrounding the mansion, then back to the mansion to open up new doors with new keys, then you head to the underground caverns beneath the mansion, and then even deeper still, the secret lab. Silent Hill is similar. You start in the town, then the apartments, then the hospital, then a trip back to the town, then the historical society, so on and so forth. Keeping with the trend of just changing one or two little things to provide a worse experience, Silent Hill 2 just shits the bed on its level design. When you break it down, these games are all linear, but Silent Hill 2 is so much more linear in the way you explore. This game loves to have these areas that seem really expansive when you first open the map, but as you explore, you quickly realize you're not going to be going into most of these rooms. You're going to hear that goddamn locked door sound effect constantly as your map, that you also need to open constantly, gets filled in with exits and scribbles of doors that you cannot open. Resident Evil's mansion has plenty of locked rooms, sure, but every room has something to find. Plenty of rooms are totally optional and only contain extra goodies, but Silent Hill 2 just wants to waste your time and have you rub up against 30 doors in the span of a minute you never were going to be able to go inside of anyway. On top of that, each area is really half-baked. You'll wander a bit, kill every enemy in the zone, find the area's big puzzle, backtrack around to find the pieces needed to solve it, and leave. The areas don't seem as directly connected as something like the Spencer Mansion and all of its surrounding area in Resident Evil. Like, it's the mansion, it's the guest residence around the mansion, it's the caverns under the mansion, you know what I mean? Silent Hill is like, you're going to this apartment. What was the significance of that to James? Okay, now you're going to a hospital. Okay, we're doing a little bit better here. Okay, now the historical society. Now we're in a prison. What's up with the prison? Like, you know what I mean? And I'm sure it's all tied to, you know, James's desire for punishment or whatever you want to call it. You know, that's part of why Pyramid Head is chasing him around in the first place. But that doesn't serve the gameplay, which is my major gripe here. Since there's no consideration for your inventory, there's no reason not to just kill all the enemies. And if you kill all the enemies, there is no fear, because you already know no threats remain in the area. At least in Resident Evil Remake, clearing an area of zombies is a little more involved, because you either deal with the chance they may rise again as Crimson Heads, stronger and faster, or you have to go out of your way to burn them all to prevent that from happening, or there's an extra cool wrinkle where you might just get a lucky headshot on a zombie. If you decide to engage with them, there's always a chance that that might happen. Silent Hill 2 doesn't have like any of these cool little things that might happen or might not happen. It's all very static in the way that it's constructed. Also, just to be clear, I'm not saying Resident Evil doesn't have more than enough ammo to murder everything in the mansion like twice over. I'm saying its gameplay is just much better because you actually have to think about what you take with you and what you're picking up. Silent Hill 2 also loves it when they can have an area that is just a long, narrow, dark hallway. People call this a tank control fixed camera game, and it's really not. It has more modern controls similar to something like the HD remaster of Resident Evil Remake, and it only has fixed camera angles sometimes. Usually you can just hold the trigger button to point the camera anywhere you want. The game calls this search mode, and it sucks. Resident Evil already had this figured out by just sticking to well thought out, fixed camera angles that highlighted exactly what you needed to see, and there was excellent cinematography on display with those chosen camera angles. The way Silent Hill 2 goes about it leads to a lot more fighting with the camera, especially in small rooms like those different apartment rooms, adding to my aggravation. Another thing that bothered me was the use of the town itself. It's largely a big old nothing burger. Nothing dynamic really happens here, and the enemies just spawn in endlessly. Hell, my immersion flew out the window when the town decided that the best way to have enemies keep up with me as I trotted through was to just yeet them at me from the sides of the road. Seriously? Is this Silent Hill or Fazbear's Fright? Look, I could go on, but let's go ahead and wrap this up. The game does offer multiple endings, bonus weapons, you know, incentives to play it again. But would I want to? Why? What could it possibly offer? Play it on hard and make the enemies tankier? That's not gonna fix their crappy AI. That's not gonna fix the exploitable stun lock. That's not gonna fix how I can just run past them with zero consequence. That's not gonna fix how the inventory has no limit, and that's not gonna fix the underwhelming boss fights. But luckily, if I do want all of Silent Hill 2's problems fixed, I can just play Resident Evil Remake, the pinnacle of survival horror. If you think Silent Hill 2 is the pinnacle of survival horror, I mean, you're welcome to think that. And I'm welcome to question how the hell you could possibly think that. Before I finally played this game, I was your typical Silent Hill 2 video essay enjoyer. That's where I first learned all the details of the story, and I picked the game up years ago and just never got around to it because I already knew all the twists and turns, and I consumed so much content that psychoanalyzed all the elements of the game in excruciating detail. Now that I've finally played the game myself, I'll go back to being a Silent Hill 2 video essay enjoyer and probably forget about this game's lackluster gameplay in like a few weeks. But even after all that, do I recommend it to you? Yeah, actually I do. Silent Hill 2 is lauded for a reason, that reason being its story. Now, watching the story online or just someone talking about it, to be honest, isn't really the same experience. No, I think the experience you really should strive for is that amazing story mixed with the game's oppressive, heavy atmosphere. Also, no, the remake is not a replacement for this game. Those are definitely two different games called Silent Hill 2. So, if it at all looks interesting to you, or if you think I'm full of shit, go play it yourself. Even though going into the game, I knew what the big twists were and the reasons the characters were the way they were and like all that stuff, it really is more about the journey, I think, because there's a lot of little things that I didn't see people talk about before, And there's a lot of unique experiences that only happened to me in my playthrough. Even though you may be a Silent Hill 2 video essay enjoyer and think that you know everything, I still recommend just going and playing the game for yourself. I know that the PS2 version of the game is running like a crazy price right now, at least at the time of this video, but you might be able to get the Xbox version for a cheaper price. And if not, you could just emulate it on PC. I know you PC bastards like to emulate everything over there. It is what it is. Just know that if you're looking for a great survival horror video game to play and actually have fun with, maybe actually get into that genre and what's great about it, Silent Hill 2 is not that. Silent Hill 2 is an experience. It's not a fun experience. Not a fun experience to play at all. To be 100% honest, it's truly a miserable experience. But it will always be an important one. If you actually think Silent Hill 2 is fun to play, let me know down in the comments. I'd actually love to debate with you about that. Do you actually prefer this gameplay over Resident Evil? If so, why? I could not imagine anybody feeling that way. If you genuinely feel that way, I want to hear about it. Let me know in the comments. I love hearing takes different from my own. Anyway, subscribe for more, and until next time, don't read letters from dead wives.